would anyone like to start with a question?
Yeah, will you tell us about how you used to get in and out of Homs at the beginning when you were doing the cinematography with Chekhov?
Chris, we had to take a first question, so I'll...
Sorry about that, I had to have a quick bathroom break. Take the question and then we'll go.
Yeah. So it was such an amazingly difficult situation. First of all, I would start this answering the question by going back a bit to the beginning of the project, when we as producers were inviting filmmakers we trusted or we liked to work with to propose ideas under a theme that was very general. We asked them to propose ideas of character-driven films about the lives of Syrians today. That was our answer to the question of how can we make films, although there is no distance yet, the things are happening. We thought, or we believed, that character-driven films are the main answer, that the closest you get to the skin of persons, individuals, the better it is when it's not yet clear what's happening on the wider context level. So I remember very well when Talal came and said, I want to go make a film in Homs. I'm so interested in the city, and because I'm from Homs and he's never been to the city, as he says in the film, I was very skeptic. I told him, why don't you go make a film in a place you know better? So he told me, okay, I'll do that. And then he disappeared for 2 weeks and came back with 5 minutes presenting Basit and Osama, and I was totally, taken by the two characters and fell in love with the project. Of course, then I learned that he was helped with wonderful people, and one of these people is here, and it was never to happen that Talal would have found Basit and Osama if not for a wonderful Syrian journalist who's just in the back there, Nawara Mahfoud. Thank you, Nawara. Thank you. So we used to dismantle the camera into 16 pieces, hide it in every part of the car's chassis, and we usually had my mother, who insisted she should go with us to Homs because she needs to see if something happens, and she used to sit in the front seat and simply smile at the soldiers on army checkpoints and tell them, thank you, you're protecting the homeland. And they were all kind of embarrassed to really take it too much with the inspection of the car. It usually took 2 hours to put the camera kit together again, and the same on going back. It was not easy. Then, of course, the story of how we got the footage, the hard disk drives and the memory cards was quite difficult. Every different scene, of what you have seen was an operation in itself, actually. Getting it out of Homs and then out of Syria and making sure nobody dies while doing that, and that was always a very obvious risk.
Sorry, I was late. My name is Chris Doyle. I'm the director of the Council for Arab-British Understanding, and it's really such a pleasure to meet Orwa, and I can't say a pleasure to see the film, but certainly it is passionate, moving, powerful, and I think a compelling testament to the bravery of those people you filmed in Homs and so many countless others across Syria who were astonishingly brave to stand up to this Assad regime. So a huge tribute to you and Talal and everybody else involved in this film. I should also say, in terms of a declaration of interest, that Homs is very close to my own heart. It's the city where I was married. My wife is from Homs and I've got family there, and actually one of the reasons that neither she or I had actually seen the film before is that I think we were just too worried as to how we'd feel in terms of seeing yet again more of these scenes of destruction on a city unrecognisable from the one that I've known for 20 years. But anyhow, let's open up some more questions, and hopefully we can explore how this film came together, and indeed more about how you came to be involved in it. I mean, you yourself grew up in Homs. I mean,
yes, it's my home city, and I mean, I think there's this universal story. Many of the audience might have experienced that, coming from a smaller, calm city that is so super boring usually, and after high school, escaping it to the capital and never wanting to go back again until the revolution started years after. And then it suddenly became a fun city to be in and a pride to belong to. So yes, the film and the revolution first, but also the film took me back to my home city, totally.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely true. I mean, Homs was a very tranquil place. I remember thinking that the capital of the revolution, and Homs, the third city of Syria, yes, but it was quiet, it was tranquil, there was no real obvious revolutionary
It was
violence.
boring. You don't need to be too diplomatic.
Yeah, people used to pass through Homs, but since the filming of this, of course, things have got much worse, and we saw just at the end there, and Bassett is what's the news of him now? What's the latest since then?
On last May, on May 9th, particularly, Bassett and everybody who stayed alive under the siege of Homs left the city in a United Nations brokered surrender. That is usually referred to as a good accomplishment of the United Nations for peace, which is more or less like, imagine if the siege of Sarajevo ended up with Sarajevo surrendering and the world celebrating that. And on the other hand, of course, everybody who left the siege, and especially people who lost many friends and who lived at very difficult times under the siege, under starvation and continuous non-stop risk of death, and a lot of experience, direct experience with death and so on. They definitely left very angry, much angrier than before. They were definitely radicalized. Fortunately, they're still independent. They still represent themselves and their city much more than anything else. But we're all radicalized, I think, after these 3 years. I am radicalized in a different way, maybe. Well, I think you cannot be but radicalized after all of this.
And are they still in Syria?
Certainly, he's in the north of Homs, trying to put together, to unite everybody in the north of Homs and liberate the city again.
He cannot stop. In War? Or?
No, not in War. Further north, but nearby. And yes, he cannot stop his dream. He wants to go back. He wants to return to Homs.
Indeed. Let's have some more questions from the audience. Gentleman there.
Hi.
One second, if we could wait for the microphone, because it's all been recorded.
Hi. It was a remarkable film. I just wondered, just being a bit ignorant, obviously from having a singular point of view, what if you could briefly sketch sort of context of Homs within the wider rebellion.
Revolution.
Revolution. Sorry,
I'm not in a. It feels like the $1 million question. It's the revolution started in March 2011 in the south of Syria, in Dera, in a city called Dera. Gradually, all of Syria moved to support Dera, standing up against the brutality of the regime. Homs moved within 2 weeks' time. The peak of pacifist movement in Homs was on Syrian Independence Day, on April 17th and 18th, 2011. It was a huge sit-in by the people of the city that ended up with a huge massacre. The numbers of killed people in that night, we still do not know. So the city stayed pacifist, as you've seen in the film, for months after that. And gradually, as much as all of Syria, there was a moment when people gradually, in different places, in tandem, felt this is not working. and started to decided gradually to fight back, and that was the beginning of a new phase, of a different phase. But I think, of course, that it was called a civil war already here in the media way before people started fighting back.
Okay. Lady here. Oh, sorry. No, sorry, I can't quite. Apologies, the lights are in my face.
I was going to get my hair cut. So, I had a question I wanted to ask was was kind of difficult, and yeah, I was thinking about how to phrase it. I mean, throughout the film, there's how do I say it? There's all these people are continually going to religion and to God for strength and asking for God's forgiveness and for understanding things what's going on, and I see throughout the film that gives amazing strength and courage. Like to Bassett, he has this incredible, he always has this gleam in his eye and a smile because he has this courage and faith in what he's doing. But I just wondered, and that's an amazing effect of it, of giving strength and stuff. But I wondered. And what I imagine is that that's happening on both sides, and that both sides of the conflict are going like, we are doing what's God willing, and it gives this certain fearlessness. And I wonder if you think that fuels the conflict, if somehow that's a fuel to the conflict, or if religion is a positive force in it.
I think it's always been like that, universally, all throughout history. I think that's not Syrian, and it's not on the both sides of what's happening in the country. I think it's always been people killing each other in the name of God, and because God said they should kill those people because they are bad. I think that's really part of human history. It's part of the job we assign to God, unfortunately. Basically, yes, when you're dying and there is no other faith around, there's no, when you've lived for decades as a society with a lot of, real despotic regime and a very phony level of secularization of the state and really a lot of pressure, oppression, detention, killings, massacres, and so on, you end up at such a time when you're about to die, or when you need to reconcile with the possibility of death any minute, probably you end up finding God again and thinking, well, if we die, at least there's some reward at the end, because we're dying for a good cause. And I'm sure that happens on the other side too, although the other side doesn't really represent itself through film or other means of free expression. And this is one of the main problems thus far, is that the other side doesn't have citizen journalism, doesn't have its own, audible voice, because it is still living under the same dictatorship we all lived in until March 2011. So there is still one state-controlled Big Brother narrative that you don't dare to challenge, and you don't dare to try, relate your own story, or it's quite like what we used to live under until the moment. And that's most unfortunate, because we do look for partners or even for enemies on the other side who have faces. Somebody will ask me, or many people, it's a repeated question, why don't you show us the other side? Why didn't you go and try to interview people on the other side? Why? Because they would kill me and they were shooting at me. I would have loved to, but the minute they laid hands on me, I was detained for 3 weeks, and I can't tell you enough about that experience, for example. And although I was super privileged to be detained only for 3 weeks, so I don't know about the other side. They need to ask for, they really need to defend themselves and tell us what's happening to them, other than being just afraid of us. If this is, of course, humanizing them, not to speak about them as simply the strange people behind curtains shooting at us.
Okay, gentleman here, if we could have a microphone.
Thank you.
the media is increasingly portraying this as a sectarian struggle. Is that how you would see it, Osama, and Bassett would see it? Did it start that way?
It certainly did not start that way. It certainly started as a popular uprising against a dictatorship, and it was against what the emergency laws we lived under since 1967, basically, and in different areas in the first year of the revolution, including, for example, the major sit-in I talked about in April in Homs in 2011. It was literally people of all walks of life, of all religions, all faiths, together at the same moment. Now, gradually, the regime started immediately to build upon the historical sectarian issues, or like unresolved problems between different sects in the region and in Syria, in the society of Syria. The regime has always had a sectarian trait to it. It always did deal with some kind of sect-based segregation between the people. So there is a sectarian resentment, basically, of course. I think that the Syrian people and the Syrian political, elite, or whatever that is, managed to keep the Syrian uprising sectarianism free for a year. But there was an amazing investment from the regime side, and also an amazing reflection of the regional disputes, meaning the Iranian, Saudi, basically, competition over, influence on the region. So that gradually did turn into a visible sectarian problem. But until the moment, there are many, people descending from minorities who are pro-revolution and who are in every part of the Syrian revolution. And there are definitely many Sunnis on the side of the regime. So it's much more a media gimmick that works with people and makes people, you need to name your enemy better. You need to, it does have part of that, but it's also a very dangerous investment from the side of media and the side of, generally speaking, the very superficial way the West still looks at the east and south of the globe.
How long were you actually in and around Homs and the whole making of the film? And during that time, did you sort of start seeing that trend of greater sectarian identity being used and abused in the way you absolutely rightly describe?
I lived the question since I was a kid.
Of course.
I'm a crossbreed total non-believer, so I did live on different sects, and did experience those very deeply rooted feelings against or towards each other. Anyway, that's all inside of me. That's my personal conflictual character. In the revolution, or in the film, the making of the film, yes, it was visible. It was growing gradually. I could say that, for example, it was very visible that when Bassett would arrive in the beginning to an area where there is a demonstration, if somebody's using any sectarian slogans, Bassett would immediately, as a local leader at the time, would immediately scold anybody saying something like that, would not tolerate a minute of that, and would say this is not allowed. Within a year's time, he was more and more tolerant of it, because it became more and more a popular sentiment, basically, and maybe a year more, he said it himself, so it's a gradual process that you just, as much as I was as a peaceful person, personally, I was going to my home city, meeting my friends, would have a very long, operation to get to meet this or that leader who has an alias name, and when I end up meeting them, I discover it's a classmate, and then we just discuss what's happening, and I would be defending a pacifist choice, and I would make perfect sense, and the person would listen to me, and we would agree on that, and within a couple of months' time, I was running out of ideas. I would arrive to the same place, start defending pacifism or the choice of peaceful movement, but I would look at the faces listening to me and I would feel how empty my words are and how it really doesn't make sense anymore. And what am I preaching there? I remember a guy whose brother was killed one day in a peaceful demonstration. The next day it was the funeral of the killed pacifist, and the young man was walking next to the coffin of his brother with his mother next to him when a sniper shot his mother with his hands on him, and the mother just fell next to the coffin of her son. And then that young man came and said, well, I'm fighting back. I don't think I didn't find a way to tell him, you should not.
I can understand that. There's a gentleman, I hope it's a gentleman, right at the back there.
You said Bassett was currently trying to organise, unity to return to Homs. Could you say something about the hopes for unity in Syria at the moment? And also there's the scene when they were calling for sort of, a no-fly zone. If there's any outside intervention that would help, because outside intervention in the Middle East, to me, has always been a big part of the historical problem rather than the solution. So it's, the hopes for unity and whether outside intervention of any sort is useful.
Hopes for unity are definitely dependent also not only on Syrians and their choices, but also on the world and its choices and its influences and its funding and its manipulation and its the way it's dealing with Syria. So it's not only a Syrian problem, the fragmentation of Syrian opposition of all kinds. Talking about intervention, so far there was never, other than the exception of a quick word said by the US administration after 1,600 people, civilians, were killed overnight in August 2013. There was never a serious idea of intervention in Syria. There were always, loud voices of the Western left standing against that. But there was never really a reason to stand against it because it was never really proposed. There has always been a use of non-interventionism as a tool, as a local political tool in the West, here on the USA and other places, to embarrass right-wing governments, for example, or to pressure them, rather than to think of what the Syrian people would like to see happen or need to be saved and so on. So I think it's all a very long story. I personally stand against military intervention. That has always been my convention, and it is. But there is intervention happening in Syria every minute. Iranian and Russian intervention are happening for 2.5 years now already. A lot of funding, a lot of weapons, and even fighters are inside Syria from these two countries, and some from North Korea too, and of course Hezbollah from Lebanon, and many militias from Iraq are all fighting next to Assad. So, talking about intervention, we have all of the world's intelligence services working inside Syria and around it now. It's not a question of whether NATO goes with armies there or not. A no-fly zone was the dream of Syrian people while being bombarded by fighter jets. Nobody ever said it will happen. So it's kind of a myth discussing it. It was a problem in Iraq 2003 maybe, but in Syria I don't think it was ever really coming. Everybody's dealing with Syria with what seems to Syrians as a very self-indulged manner, which is simply to think of the Syrian question as another card in their domestic politics, rather than thinking about what the people of Syria need to survive or to eat or to carry on their life. For the Syrian people, it's relative. 1 minute when you are being bombarded, you would prefer to have a very, very bad US intervention come now, please, because it's less bad. Then somebody in the West would have the luxury of saying, no, it's not perfect as a solution, we don't want it. We would like you to sort out your problems. What can we would we be allowed to sort out our problems, or are everybody in the world trying to meddle with our problem? So in that sense, it's a very difficult question to answer. I don't have an answer other than the fact that I don't believe Western policymakers have the courage yet to decide to make a difference about Syria, to decide to really do something, which is not necessarily military intervention. Between intervention and inaction, I think there are like 1,000 choices that were not yet tested.
Right, there's a couple of people at the back. Three, if we could pass the mic to one of them. Anyone? You
I would like to ask questions about the post-production, the film itself. You have shot through a long period, almost 2 years. At what point do you want to stop telling the life of Bassett? Why does it end there? And also, how do you ship the material out? Do you edit it in Lebanon, or do you take it to Berlin? And then I've seen in the credit that many editors. So how do you reassemble such a long period of material?
Thank you for the question. I'll just answer it because it's 3 questions that you asked. First one is, how did you decide it's ended? It was a very, very long time until we found an ending. It was a very difficult choice because, of course, in the beginning we were making a film about 2 wonderful young men in a peaceful revolt that was, supposed to end quickly. We never saw it coming. We never expected that we would be stuck in a story that is, not ending. So it took a long time until Talal came back with this concept that is now the film, which is the idea that the film ends with Bassett returning to Homs, with Bassett's idea of returning to Homs. And because it is an open ending, and what we are still witnessing now is that we could have still been filming now, and we could have made a sequel. It's the story is not ended yet, but it ends by something that still persists now. A year after the film is finished, the shooting is finished, not the film, and we look, and what does Bassett want to do now? He wants to return to Homs. We are still stuck in the same moment in that sense, and I think Talal was very, he found a brilliant way to close the arc of his drama. Now, technically speaking, many editors, because of the duration of the footage, and because there was a lot of evaluation sessions where we stopped, watched a lot of footage and cleaned it up, assembled some scenes from it, here and there in Syria first, in Cairo second, and then we ended up, I think, with like 16 or 17 hours assembly out of 350 hours of footage. And that 16, 17 hours assembly was taken to Berlin, where a wonderful Romanian editor worked together with Talal and Fabini, and they ended up with the 90 minutes you have seen.
Could I just ask very quickly on that? There must have been a lot of editorial discussion about what to leave out in terms of the violence. I mean, people were killed in that film right in front of the camera. I mean, this is, if you go to the BBC and conflicts and the way that they are portrayed, they're very nervous about sort of showing that. What was that sort of discussion, like in terms of what did you leave out in that huge amount of footage?
It's a very big dispute or debate in the world of film. It's not a debate in the world of television. There's no debate in television anyway, is there? With film, I think the film has a rating of 15 years old. That if you're under 15, you can't watch it. If there were more dead bodies, it would still be 15, and you would still be notified there are dead bodies in this film if you don't want to watch it. It's a big question. It is. This was the choice of Talal Derki. It was a continuous discussion indeed. The child you see, Taha, the child you see dead on the floor in a scene, that was, of course, a much longer scene. Then we started discussing, what is the right duration for this? How long should people see this? and what you have seen is Talal's choice. And I think it was good and conservative, like really taking good care of a wider audience's, tolerance. I don't know, there's no yes and no right or wrong in this sense. In the next film we produced with, which is hopefully coming soon to London too, you will see much more violence, because it was also, has a time shift, it was also made when violence became even worse. Once I remember attending a master class of Ritipan, the great Cambodian documentary maker, who always made very difficult films to say because of the level of violence. He always made films about the massacres in the 70s and Khmer Rouge and so on. And I remember him saying something that stayed with me and will probably stay. He said, "We have to give you your share, otherwise we would die."
Right. we got one hand up there at the back, and then we'll come to the front.
Thank you, Orwa, for the amazing film. I want to ask, I look at these guys, and they're a football player and a journalist, and I saw doctors. I saw guys that we could identify with. They're very different from the fighters against the Assad regime who make it to the media in this country, who chop heads and kill civilians on camera and are proud of it. Do you think those guys had another option other than fighting at the moment when they held arms against the Assad regime? Would they be able to not, was it actually a choice that they made? He's 19, Abdelbaset Taroud. A personal question, if you were 19 when this started under that much violence, would you do the same, would it be possible for you to take the same choices that they took, since they're people we can identify with? Thank you.
Hello, Sahla. When I was 19, I was still living the shock of the 1982 massacre in Hama, where 16 of my direct cousins were killed overnight. So I could never done that. I truly believe that it took a generation, a new generation that did not live the 80s, to revolt in Syria. They don't remember that. I do. So I am an intellectual. Would they have a choice? Just as I said earlier now, I saw them take that choice. And no, it was not. To me, this is a film about forced choices. They could not take another choice. But this choice, or this forced choice, became obligatory because it took a long time, because many were killed. If it was solved earlier, they would have, that would have never become an obligatory choice. When they take that choice, they become really liable to being manipulated by financiers and intelligence and everything in the world. So there is a huge risk factor to turning it into an armed revolution. But again, was that a choice? I don't think so. These are the fighters I know. They started fighting in Syria everywhere. I have friends fighting in many places in the country. And they are as moderate, and you can identify with them, everywhere in the country. But yes, gradually, the other phase, the other kind of revolution started, emerged and became visible. It took us a long time until we realized how that happened. We did not realize, for example, in June, July 2011, when Bashar al-Assad issued this amnesty, we were just waiting for our friends, our pacifist activists, to be released because they should be part of the amnesty the president just issued. They never showed up. They were never released. But what we did not know at the time is that he was releasing all of the Al-Qaeda fighters he captured coming back from Iraq in the past couple of years, and he just released them out. So we did not know what was happening. It was happening just next to us. And we started seeing different look of different fighters. but we never understood how did that happen. Why don't they know the revolution we started, the slogans we were chanting? But who are they at the end, these radicals? Aren't they human beings? And isn't their radicalization part of a story? You know, like a story of oppression, a story of ignorance, a story of, I don't know what more and more to say. So it's all not an easy thing. What happened, I think, is Monsters, Inc., the film. Totally. Western media got so bored of moderate fighters in the country, got so bored of the news of peaceful demonstrations, and started even pressuring activists in Syria to, where are the Al-Qaeda fighters? And we would tell them, well, we don't see them yet. We heard there are 3 in that place, but we could not find them. People would say, when you get footage of them, come back. We stop getting us people going in circles, and you know, it's not fun anymore. We need the Salafists. And many media activists started looking for the Salafists, you know, because that's what the world is interested in seeing. And I think that image still goes on until today. I think that's what fed ISIS and made it what it is today. It was this amazing paranoia that shows an amazing fascination at the same time. Because it doesn't matter what Basit or Abu Ahmad or whoever in Syria who is just, you know, someone from my or your neighborhood trying to fight back. It doesn't matter what they do. What matters is only those strange, scary people, Al-Qaeda. And these are the people we will blow up and blow up, you know, until they really become important.
Okay, I promised this lady here a question, and I think we've only got a couple of minutes, and then we have to leave, unfortunately, the theatre.
Hello. Firstly, thank you so much for the film. Over these few years, it's films like this that help me to see more, and that's very special. My question is more, I look at the film and I see you and I see all these connections you have in the film, and I wonder, I know so much of it doesn't make the final cut. I wonder if you would mind sharing with us perhaps something that you wish had, or perhaps a moment, or perhaps even just a character or thing that you might have liked to share with us that we didn't see.
You wanted to take one more question, if we could take that together. Yes, the lady over.
Basit is such a compelling and sort of eye-catching character, but Osama, the other character, is obviously very important, and it's much more complicated because he's literally obscured in the film, and he disappears halfway through it. So I wonder if you could talk a bit about the choices around Osama and what you think's happened now.
First one was a question about what was left out. Is there something that was very memorable that you left out? Is that
many things, definitely. And I would have my list, and Talal would have his list, and every one of us would have their list. I have one shot that made me that I was dying to have in the film, and it was actually in one of the battles. It was a very long shot of Basit, walking quickly on a pavement that goes high up a hill, carrying on his back a friend of his who is wounded and with blood dripping. And it was a very long shot with him just really in the most moving, iconic shot, and it had to be taken out for the final polishing of the dramatic narrative or arc of the film. So that's my favorite missing shot. Osama was actually, he was the main motivation of the film. The film started with, the film you've seen started with his eyes, with what he shot on his laptop, with his approach to what's happening around him. The thing is that it was always a big, difficult question of whether it's safe for him being still detained, that he is fully exposed or not. Now, as a simple fact, we ended up without the final approval of one of his family members. You know, some of them were a little concerned that it might act against his safety. So I think later on, when he is safe with us, when he is released, because we know he's alive, but we don't know where he is exactly, and definitely he is one of the most important examples of media pacifist activists who were detained and whom the regime deals with with such an amazingly shocking manner, because you'd imagine that the regime should be fighting, theoretically, the radicals on the other side, or those, you know, religious fundamentalists with guns, but it's not. It's fighting people like Osama much harsher than it is fighting those. And Osama, now it's almost 2 years since he was detained, and we still don't know where he is. So we cannot, it's an amazing burden, actually, Olivia, just, you know, deciding whether his face should be exposed, his real name should be exposed or not. And at the end, it's kind of a standard procedure used by all media, human rights organizations, that family approval is a must. So maybe when you see the film with his face, hopefully soon, you will have a, you know, he would be a better character in the film, because yes, his face is, you know, does matter.
We're going to have to wrap it up there. I just wanted to say thank you very much to everyone involved, to the Bertha Foundation who actually funded this film, but particularly for you to come and speak to us about the film and extremely painful circumstances, of course. And of course our thoughts go out to Syrians everywhere, and the people who should never have had to suffer what they have had, and such dreadful, dreadful circumstances, and a regime that's visited upon its own population such indescribable crimes. But thank you so much, and thank you everyone for their brilliant questions and attention tonight. Thank you. We could depart quite quickly from the theatre, because apparently